how are you going to do this when you also have a full-time job? I think that's one of the biggest things, I struggled with, and it's one of the reasons that I didn't do this earlier. And it also might be one of the reasons you're holding back or just saying there's no chance in hell of doing it. Hey, have you had enough of the corporate politics? Are you starting to dream about escaping from being an employee for corporate companies? Well, today I want to share with you 3 ways that you can escape the corporate grind if you're a programmer, and then 5 aspects of those 3 ways that'll really help you decide which one of them may be the right one for you. So the first way that you can escape the corporate grind that's pretty common, that you've probably already heard of, is you can become a solo consultant or a freelancer. This is basically when you do similar type of work that you do today, whether it's DevOps, programming, product management, any kind of role in the tech industry. But instead of working as an employee for the company that you're helping, you form usually an LLC corporation yourself. And then you go out and find clients, basically companies that need help, just like you'd be helping as an employee, except you kind of set the terms of how you want to work with them. So you usually have what's called a master services agreement. It's just a document that you have your client sign that says, this is the rules basically around how you're going to pay me, what I will and won't do. And when I started doing this, now I've been in consulting for an agency for 10 years, but when I started working for myself about 6 years ago as a consultant, what I really liked about it is being able to choose, first of all, when I want to leave that client and go on my own and just do something different. Let's say that client's just being difficult and I'm tired of working with them. I can just exit the contract if it's in the clause. Also, not having to work as much overtime. If you want to escape the corporate grind, the grind is really, having to work all the extra hours and being under all the pressure and trying to hit all the deadlines. And I really enjoy when I do solo consulting that I can be clear in what's called your statement of work. It's basically another document that you give to your client, and it sets the terms with the client on what you're going to do, what you're going to deliver. So if you don't want to be working overtime, if you don't want to be responsible for certain aspects, like I don't want to be responsible for like disaster recovery, for example. Like I'm familiar with a lot of cloud architecture and things like that. But if I'm working with a client doing some sort of software architecture or programming, I don't feel confident that things like, if like that section of the cloud goes down and it needs to be, geo-redundant, that I want that level of responsibility on me. So I usually put things like that in the statement of work. But there's a million things I could talk about here, and I'm going to do some future videos this year about each of these 3 ways. But one way that you can consider escaping from the corporate grind that's really pretty straightforward is to be a freelancer or a solo consultant. Now, the second way that you can escape the corporate grind, and I'm sure you've thought about this before if you're a programmer, is to build your own software product. If you've been in the industry long enough, you've probably been exposed to product management, sales, support, all these other functions that are around delivering a software product. And I think a lot of people think if I'm going to go out and start a software company or build a software product, it has to be, to the scale of Facebook or some big company. Excuse me. And it has to be like a viral, delivery model where you're going to have millions and millions of customers. But there's a lot of very successful, very profitable software products out there where the whole market might be several thousand people, but they're paying a lot more. They're not just paying like $15 a month or something like that. So if you want to escape the corporate grind, one thing you can consider is learning how do you actually find different market segments out there. And I'm going to, again, talk to you about this year in some other videos that might have problems that need to be solved by technology, and then figure out, okay, I don't have, 10 other people working for me. I'm trying to escape the corporate grind. I want to work for myself. You've heard of the term solopreneur. That's what kind of these 3 things I'm talking about with you today are. But, if you want to do it on your own, you want to find a software product in a market where they don't really use a lot of technology today, and the solution they need solved, the problem, that they need solved, doesn't require a ton of technology. I think one of the mistakes I made, I'll be honest with you, when I tried a startup about 10 years ago, the first one I did, I've tried two so far, was, I was in my own consulting technology job and working on really complicated projects, like I'm sure you have, that have, a really complicated stack with a whole bunch of, services, and some of them are microservices even. And, it's in the cloud. There's all this architecture. There's all these layers, all this process. And so when you think of starting your own software project, you can think you have to do all that. But, when you're going on your own, you actually don't have to do all that stuff. You want to build as simple of a product as possible that you can get some feedback on from customers, get it in front of them, get your first few customers to hopefully pay for it, and ramp up from there. And the third way that you can escape the corporate grind, now there's more than these three, but these are the three that I have experience with that I think most developers or people in tech positions are well positioned to switch into, is to sell courses online. Now, what this involves is, let's say you've been doing, React development for a really long time, and you're really comfortable with teaching a team, let's say, how to build a component library, basically a set of visual React components that you can pick from to build your UI, your solution. Almost every team out there, when they're building a software product in React, it gets to a certain scale where if they don't have a component library, you get a lot of duplication of different types of components and things like that. And so there's companies out there that they're just hitting that threshold now where they're starting to hit those problems. And if they find you out there online or, through a trade show or a presentation that you give, there's a lot of different ways you can network and reach your audience. I'll talk about that more in future videos. But if you can position yourself as someone that can ease that transition, you could charge a lot more money. You can find clients that'll be willing to do it. And basically, you can offer kind of what you love to do the most in your job. Instead of being subject to everything that the company needs, if there's some specific niche in technology that you really love working with, basically, if you spend the effort, and there's a lot involved in just kind of building a name for yourself out there. And again, I'm going to talk about that a lot this year in other videos, but that's another way that you can really make some money is sell some education. Instead of you having to go in and be a consultant where they're paying you to, build the component library for them, take the knowledge that you already have around what does it take to do a good job with that, and figure out how do you create a course. Now, there's a lot of e-learning platforms out there where you can pay them, a monthly fee, and they'll host your courses for you. There's also some of them that will take like a percentage of whatever you want to charge for your monthly course. In my case, I happen to use WordPress and Laravel and few different JavaScript technologies. I won't bore you with it, but I kind of have my own course infrastructure that I use, so I don't have to pay fees. But the fees aren't horrible, especially if you're starting out. You probably want to just pay them and not deal with that. But another way that you can escape the corporate grind, and I'm going to talk in a minute about how you do this alongside your job, is by selling what you know to people that are just about to need to do it. Hey, one thing real quick, too, that you might be thinking about before we get into the 5 aspects that you should consider about each of these 3 ways that you can escape the corporate grind that I just mentioned is I've got a career guide. You may have already grabbed this, but if not, there's a link in the description where I think one of the questions a lot of people ask is, am I far along enough in my career that I have the right skills that it even makes sense for me to start a company, that it even makes sense to sell courses online, that it even makes sense to do any of these kind of solo activities. Now, there's no real hard and fast rule about it, but I'll tell you, I've had experience with all 3 of these ways of escaping the grind that I'm mentioning to you today. They have a lot of trade-offs. And if you don't at least have some skill in what you're about to consult in, or about a product you're about to build, that technology, or, expertise around a course you're about to sell, you're going to have a really hard time because people who are experienced are going to know that you don't really know what you're talking about, or just that you're not nearly experienced enough. So if you're wondering that, if you're kind of questioning, hey, am I at the point in my career yet where I could actually go on my own and it would go fairly smoothly for me? Now, it's going to be an effort either way. Grab that career guide, because I talk in there a little bit about kind of stages of your career and having a realistic expectation around that. But let's get into the 5 aspects of these different ways that you can escape from the corporate grind and how they impact each of those 3 ways that you can escape. The first one is effort versus income. And this is pretty straightforward. This is how much work do you have to put in to get money back? Now, as a solo consultant, it's a pretty high effort per the income you make. Now, what I mean by that is you need to work an hour typically to get paid. So if you want to scale up your business, really the only way to do it is to, let's say, have other consultants work under you, or to raise your bill rate, charge more per hour. And there is somewhat of a ceiling to how much you can charge. Now, one of my most popular videos I made about, 4 or 5 years ago now, kind of weighs the trade-offs between being a software consultant or an employee. And one way that you can make more money as a consultant is you can charge for a percentage of what the company is going to get out of you building the thing for them. So let's say you're saving the company $1 million. You might charge them $50,000 or $100,000. And they're going to look at that as, wow, that's a small percentage of the upside for us. But typically, out of these 3 ways that I'm about to explain all these details about, if you choose to be a solo consultant, even though it's got some other benefits that I'm going to talk about in a minute, you're always going to kind of be tied to make money. You got to work a certain number of hours. So it's not a bad deal. It's still much better, or it can be better if you're ready for it, than being an employee. But that's just something you should consider. Now, selling education online, I'd say that one has a medium level of effort versus income. You do have to get involved in content marketing, which is what I'm doing right now. You need to create podcasts or YouTube episodes, or basically some kind of content, maybe blog posts, although that's not maybe as effective as it used to be. It still is. You need to have regular content that you're putting out there to reach your audience that you want to sell these courses to. So, to get paid, you often are doing a lot of free work in the content marketing side. But the upside is, once you build your courses or your education or your tools, whatever it is that you're selling to potential customers, again, about React or DevOps or, whatever you want to teach people, you only have to create that course once. And if you get a big enough audience, you can basically have income coming in month to month to month. And that can grow to a point that can be something that's a lot easier to potentially switch into while you're working a job. And I'm going to talk about that aspect of it in a minute. But yeah, if you're considering selling courses, you can make actually a lot of money for less effort. Now, again, you got to show up regularly and create content, because otherwise you won't be reaching an audience. You won't grow it. You won't bring in new customers. But if you're willing to do that, people talk about passive income. It's kind of a misnomer, or it's just not the best term. It's not passive and then you're not doing anything, but it's not nearly 40 hours a week. I mean, you can get it down to a very small number of hours that you're actually working, and mostly, the system that you build and some email marketing automation you use and some other technologies I'll talk to you more about in some future videos kind of do the selling for you, so that, if for as long as you're kind of reaching new people, you're making new sales. And the highest of these 3, as far as effort versus income, is building your own software product. Because ultimately, now the upside to building your own software product, if it blows up and it's really successful and you price it right, it can be extremely lucrative. Obviously, some of the giant success stories of like the FANG companies, those all started as, in someone's garage, typically small companies. But the effort that you have to put in to get a software product off the ground, I think as developers, especially if you're a programmer, we're often mostly just thinking about writing the code and hosting the infrastructure and paying for those monthly expenses and making sure we have good deployment and testing. But we're not thinking about, we got to sell this thing. We got to market it. We got to have legal contracts in place. We got to make sure that when things go wrong, we can support the customers, right? We got to have ongoing changes. Also, like, if there's third-party services that we depend on, that let's say APIs that we're using, those are going to evolve, and we have to be ready to evolve the software product too. So as far as effort versus income, I mean, you could debate it a little bit, but in my experience, I think creating a software product and selling it yourself as a programmer, totally doable. I'm not saying any of these three approaches aren't viable, but it's really one of the more high effort situations that you can choose from if you do want to escape the corporate grind. The second thing to consider if you're going to escape the corporate grind, and if you want to try any of these three approaches that I'm recommending you consider, is what is the marketing effort that's involved? I alluded to it a little bit in the previous bullet point, but marketing simply is just reaching potential customers and telling them about your products or services. So there's a variety of ways you can do this. There's obviously, you can, literally talk to a customer that you meet in person. That's kind of the old school way of marketing, and it's still totally effective in certain markets and depending on what you're doing. You can go to trade shows, again, not as popular as they used to be. They're still very good for networking. But, digital marketing, basically reaching people with content marketing like I do, or there's, like paid Facebook ads, which can work, but also can be really annoying. These are all different ways that you can market, one of these three. And so I want to share with you my opinion of, because one of the things that you might be thinking about if you want to escape the corporate grind is, man, I don't want to have to sell. I don't want to have to market. Like, people hate sales. People hate marketing. And, I'll be honest with you. I felt like this most of my career. And, I didn't want to be, especially when I came out here on YouTube and about a year or 2 years ago, I decided, okay, I think I've been on here long enough. I think there's enough people watching these videos. I know I have a lot of experience and I have a lot to offer. I want to actually start helping people, like with paid career coaching. I didn't want to come off scummy. I didn't want to come off like, any other typical, stereotypical salesperson that you've thought of. But that's not sales and marketing in itself. Marketing and sales is really just finding people and saying, hey, I've got something to help you. Do you want it? If they don't want it, no. If they do, awesome. I'm so glad you found me. This is exactly what I wanted. So the approach that you use and how you talk to people, you can choose if you want to be cool and if you want to just be relaxed about it and just be helpful. You don't have to use all kinds of, slick psychological tricks with people to do, marketing and sales. So let's get into these anyway. The first one is a software product. In my opinion, a software product has the highest amount of marketing that you're going to need to do for it to be successful. Partially because, you can sell a software product purely online, but you're going to have to run ads because nobody's going to have heard of the company that, that you'll probably, an LLC or something you'll incorporate to sell the product. You also, if you want to try to reach customers and you don't want to do it in person, you may have to do content marketing or something like that. Again, YouTube videos, podcasts, blog posts, LinkedIn articles, stuff like that. But also, usually if you want a product to really continue to grow as it evolves, and let's say you eventually hire some new employees, again, that would be, let's say your product's successful, you're making good money, you want to scale it and then sell it eventually, which I know a lot of people want to do because they want to make a ton of money. That's cool. You don't need a huge company to be, make really good money with a software product and escape the corporate grind. But let's say, you did. Well, now you're going to have to spend at least a little bit of time meeting with people in person, companies you want to partner with, maybe going to trade shows, doing a lot more in-person type of marketing activities or paying, someone for marketing. Now, selling education online, if you're going to sell courses or something like that, I'd say that actually has probably more of like a medium level of marketing and sales. I market and sell my services, career coaching, and also, I've got a product that's launching literally in this last week. It's starting to launch for people on my email list. But, if you're going to sell courses, really the main thing that you're going to have to do for marketing is content marketing. What I'm doing here, YouTube videos, podcasts. I don't have any desire to go to trade shows. I don't have any desire to speak at conferences. I get invited to speak places all over the world all the time. It's just not something I want to do. And it's also not something that I think I really need to do to grow my business. I'm helping people with coaching and selling education and stuff like that, so that I can have more of my life back. I want to escape the corporate grind. I don't want to spend more time in it. But, if you are considering selling education or something like that, or creating some courses around your programming or technical expertise, you are going to have to do some marketing, but I'd consider it a medium effort. It's really not too bad. Now, if you're a solo consultant, the good news about doing that is, honestly, the marketing effort required, at least at first, is pretty minimal. Because honestly, if you're even halfway decent at networking, you probably have a network of people that you've worked with. If you're using LinkedIn, you're probably connected to existing employers and existing colleagues. If not, why aren't you doing that? You should be connecting to everybody on LinkedIn that you've at least worked with so that you can, speak to them. But, if you were to go on your own, you've got all those people that you've worked with that probably have left and joined different companies over the years. And now, who knows where they are? They might need some help. And a lot of times you can get a gig, a solo consulting gig. The first 3 or 4 that I got when I went on my own 6 years ago, I got through referrals, through people that I already knew. But, eventually, if you do want to reach new people, you're going to have to either rely on purely referrals and hope that everybody you've helped, you've done a good enough job as a consultant or a freelancer that they're going to bring you new business. Or you may need to do content marketing similar to, what I'm doing again here with YouTube or podcasts. Now, you probably are not going to have to worry about doing it as frequently because you can rely on, word of mouth referrals and because you're working on the job at a company, even if it's remote, let's say you're doing remote consulting, you're still getting to talk to that client and its people, and they all have connections. So, there's a little bit of built-in marketing sort of, so to speak, out of the box if you want to be a solo consultant. Third, let's talk about how dependent are you going to be on other people to be successful if you choose to try one of these 3 approaches to escape the corporate grind. Well, one thing a lot of people don't realize is if you choose to be a freelancer or a solo consultant, that can be one of the most highly dependent on other people for success ways to try to not have to be an employee anymore. When I went on my own as a solo consultant, my first couple consulting contracts that were, under my LLC were still for corporations that I had actually worked with in the past when I worked for another consulting agency. Again, I don't know how long you've been watching these YouTube videos, but I worked for a consulting agency for 10 years, and then I went on my own about 6 years ago. But, ultimately, if you go into a company and you try to build, let's say, their DevOps pipeline or their, front end for their software application, or you try to help them with Scrum or, anything like that, you've still got all the other people at that company that you have to, basically have a decent relationship with, and you have to build some level of trust in them. So, you're still very dependent, unfortunately, on other people to be successful if you choose to be a solo consultant. But again, weigh that with the other options that I described earlier, or the other aspects, I should say, as well as the ones that are coming up in a second here. Now, if you want to build a software product on your own and sell that, I'd say that has about a medium level of dependence on other people. I mostly say that because you're probably going to get to do a lot of building of the product yourself, especially let's say you're a developer, you can easily build many types of software products yourself. Now, a AAA rated MMO, can you build that on your own? Probably not. A business application or something that solves a problem like a point of sale system for a specific niche, or some kind of little data analytics tool, or, an IoT solution for some unique, cool thing. You can totally build that on your own. Now, if you want to learn digital marketing and sales, I didn't mind learning it. I wanted to learn it so I could do it myself and not depend on other people. Then you really won't be dependent on that many people until your company and your software product, again, grows to a certain point. And that's a good problem to have, that, you need help. But if you don't want to learn marketing and you don't want to learn sales, then you're probably going to have to bring someone in right at the beginning when you build your software product. Because I'll tell you, one of the biggest mistakes I made, this could save you a lot of pain, is don't ever build a software product that you think customers want, then give it to them and hope that that's the right product. No, you need to spend a lot of time talking to people that might buy the product first, know their problem better than anybody else, be able to describe it to them so they're like, this guy put into words what I've been trying to articulate for years. He knows exactly what my problems are. If you know exactly what your customers' problems are when you're about to build a software product, that's when you're in the place where you can actually build the damn thing and have, a chance in hell that you're going to be successful. I think the reason so many businesses fail, and especially so many tech companies fail, little tech startups, is they're full of engineers that are excited about starting a product because they've got the product engineering skills, but they don't have any marketing, sales, or like market research, customer interviewing skills. So, be realistic with yourself. If you want to start a software product out there, I'm all for it, man. I make these videos kind of I want to help you. And in this one, I'm trying to give you some ways to escape the corporate grind, but I'd also hate to see you spend 2 years of your life building a software product to bring it to market only to find the problem it solves isn't a burning enough problem that customers really are willing to pay for it, or that there's just not enough customers to pay for it that it actually can sustain your income so you can get the hell out of the corporate grind. Otherwise, you just spent 2 years basically building something for nothing. Now, selling education online, luckily, that has the lowest dependence on others. You can probably do content marketing, again, YouTube videos, podcasts. You have to learn how to do some basic email marketing. Very straightforward. I've learned it. It's for programmers, especially, or product managers, anybody in technical positions. This isn't rocket science. You can definitely learn it. Now you got to learn how to write well, some sales copy and things like that. Again, none of this is rocket science. You can figure this out. But if you can build the courses, do some content marketing, and reach people, you can basically sell courses completely on your own. You don't need help from anybody else. Now you can choose. I've seen a lot of other companies that are successful do this. Sometimes a solopreneur or somebody will start up a little online, brand and start selling some sort of courses or something. And they'll then invite other people who also have really good content to sell stuff through them too. But that's not really you being dependent on others. That's just another way to make money and to kind of scale out the business. So next, let's talk about something really essential, which is the cost of transitioning to any of these ways to escape the corporate grind. How are you going to do this when you also have a full-time job? I think that's one of the biggest things, I struggled with, and it's one of the reasons that I didn't do this earlier. And it also might be one of the reasons you're holding back or just saying there's no chance in hell of doing it. Well, of these 3 ways that I've talked to you about today to kind of escape from the corporate grind, the one that's probably got the highest transition cost, meaning it's going to require the most of your time and your energy on top of your job, is building a software product and starting a little software company. If you've got to, again, talk to customers, figure out how to either network with them online, interview them, get a lot of feedback, do a lot of research before you even start building the damn thing. Then you build a minimum viable product. Then, you put a support infrastructure around it, all the other stuff. Then you got to do some sales, all of that while you have a full-time job. Now, let me be straight with you. It's totally doable, but you're either going to have to put quite a few hours in per week. Like, I think it was the second of the 2 startups that I tried that failed. They were great learning experiences, though. I learned a lot. That startup, I think I was working, like 12 hours on the weekend, so almost 2 full 8-hour days on the weekend, and then a few sparse hours here and there during the week for 2 years to try to get that product off the ground. Now, I kind of went at it a little harder than I needed to. And also I still, even after the failure I had of the first company of not talking to customers enough, I could have talked to customers even more in that second company, and I would have probably had a better chance of being successful because we got the product built. We even had a beta program and a lot of people all over the United States that were enrolled in it and giving us feedback, but eventually they just didn't want to buy it. The pain that they had, the solution they needed was not compelling enough for them to actually, put down their hard-earned dollars. And ultimately that's what a business is about. So if you're thinking of these 3 ways of escaping the corporate grind, possibly starting a software product, just keep in mind, again, it can be totally successful. Just keep in mind the cost to transition, meaning the impact on you continuing to work in the corporate, the corporate grind until you can get out is probably going to be the highest. It's going to have the biggest impact. Now, a solo consultant, I'd say that probably has a medium impact on transition cost. And here's why. You can basically find, let's say, on WeWork.com or some of these other sites where people are looking for, low paid freelance people, and sometimes actually high paid, depending on what the engagement is. You can find your first few clients and build some small projects where you incorporate yourself, you create an LLC. Again, I'm going to talk to you this year more about like legal contracts and incorporating and all that kind of stuff. But, you can find your first few clients and basically build something for them where you can do it, in off hours. And you can set a contract with them where hopefully it's a very small thing that you're helping them with, but it's something you like to do, and get a few wins with some new clients so that you can on your website have some references, right? You've seen, I'm sure, when you go to buy any kind of product today, when you go to the front page, if it's like a software product, it'll be like as seen on, and it'll mention like different TV shows or it'll say like, our customers, and it'll have like Google and, GM or, basically companies that they've done work for or that their product's been used for. You kind of need to build up some references before you quit your day job and go full in. Now, you can still find a solo contract that's a longer contract without references. I did, but it's a little bit harder to stumble into that. It's not something that I'd say will work for everybody. If you, let's say, are an employee, you've never done any kind of consulting, because remember, I was an employee for 10 years. Then I switched into consulting, did that for 10 years. Then I started to work for myself. But, if you've never done any kind of consulting, getting your feet kind of wet with the contracting process, saying that you're done, resolving issues with your client when, again, you're not working for the company, you're working with someone else in kind of a freelance or solopreneur capacity. I think it's really good to just kind of do that on your own a little bit, kind of kick the tires, learn what that takes before you switch into like let's say a year long or even 6 month long, plus project where you're now under a contract, not just as an employee where they can fire you, but as a business where, you got to make sure your liability is covered. You got to make sure if for some reason you make mistakes, you've got some basic insurance, again, things I can talk with you about. Now, the lowest of these as far as transition cost, but remember, there's all these other trade-offs I've talked with you about. You got to weigh them all, is selling education online. If you want to create some, really cool courses to help people solve common problems in software or Scrum or DevOps or product management or, anything around technology, you can start building that literally like today if you want to. Now, you're not going to have anybody to sell it to, though, until you have an audience. And the way you get an audience is through content marketing like I'm doing now. So, if you're thinking of, man, I'd love to have some passive income, again, passive, don't love that term. I'd love to have some money rolling in, every month that would slowly, hopefully get to the point that it pays as much or more than what I need per month that I get from my day job. If the best thing you can honestly do is find a market that you want to help, have some ideas of solutions that you want to build, courses that you want to use to educate people, and start some content marketing. Create a podcast, create a YouTube channel, start writing LinkedIn articles, and start helping, anybody that reads your article, anybody that watches your video, anybody that listens to your podcast with some of the things that were they to, buy your courses, you could go even deeper. Like you could give them personalized actionable steps that they can take to get the results they want. So the cost of transition, you can do that at your own pace. You could do 2 hours a week. You could do 4 hours a week. Because again, you don't have any real pressure. Like for me, honestly, it took me 3 years of creating YouTube videos before I had my first career coaching client. Now, that was partially because, as I've talked to you about in all my other videos, I was just super burned out and I had no energy to really put into the business. But just keep that in mind that, if you're thinking about some ways to escape the corporate grind, if you're willing to do content marketing, selling, courses that help people accomplish things where you don't have to actually do it for them, but you can help them do it. That's probably the lowest transition cost way of doing it. And the last thing to consider is if you're going to try to escape the corporate grind and apply one of these 3 ways, how much learning is going to be required of you? Well, I think the one that requires the most learning is if you're going to build a software product. You're going to have to learn the technology, of whatever it is that you're building. Now, if you already use, and this is a big reason too, if you already, let's say you're a strong C# developer, or you're really strong with, a SaaS platform, something like Microsoft CRM or something like that. Why use a different technology if you don't have to? I've seen some developers, and this is something I'll warn you against if you're a programmer, you're thinking of doing this, that are like, I know I'm going to start a company and I'm going to build it using a technology I'm not familiar with because it'll give me a chance to learn. I think that's a horrible idea. If you want to be successful with a business, for God's sakes, use the technology you know the best. Because the last thing you need is to waste time learning more technology than you need. You're already going to be learning everything you need to learn, about the market of the customer, how to sell to them. So, if you're going to start a software product, I think the learning needs for you are going to be the highest because you're going to have to learn anything technical you don't know already that's needed to solve the customer's problem to build the product. You're going to have to learn a lot about the customer and their market and their problems. And then you're going to have to learn everything that's involved about running a software business, sales, marketing, support, all that good stuff. Again, if you don't bring somebody else in. Now, as far as a medium level of effort, as far as learning, I'd say being a solo consultant. If you're going to be a solo consultant, the good news is you're probably going to be, not having to learn nearly as much about business. I talked earlier in the content marketing section and some of the transition cost about some of the things to consider about being a consultant, but you're not going to have to actually learn, nearly as much as you would if you're going to sell a software product and run a software company. But you are going to have to learn probably much more new technology. I'll tell you as a consultant, again, that video I made 5 years ago gets into this. You're often getting on brand new software projects as a consultant, and part of the challenge is they've got this Frankenstack, right? They've got this, you may know, let's say React, and they're like, oh, we've got a React project, but you get in there and it's not just React, it's React and 18 other open source libraries that you've never used, plus a bunch of APIs and microservices that you've never been exposed to, some database schema or some CSV imports you've never seen. Again, I'm talking about programming here. This could be, anything you're trying to help people with. But yeah, if you're going to be a solo consultant, I think the amount of learning you're going to have to do, it's about a medium level. You're definitely going to have to learn some new stuff. That's going to continue to be a challenge, just like you're dealing with today as a programmer, but not to the level of a software company of building one yourself. And the least amount of learning that's required to really start your own thing, start to make some money on the side, start to escape the corporate grind, is selling courses. If you want to sell education, if you want to help people do what you already know to do to impact their company, really the main thing you're learning is digital marketing, content marketing, how to reach people, and how to package up the knowledge that you have into education. One thing that you may or may not know is taking information that you know and throwing it into a set of notes, or let's say a wiki topic that's appropriate for a company as an employee so that your other programmers can read it. That's one level of expertise in educating people. Selling courses online where there's a huge variety of people, they don't work for your company, you can't assume anything. You need to actually learn to have some good techniques for communication and education that are beyond what you'd have to have usually to be pretty successful within a company. So there are going to be things that you're going to have to learn for sure if you want to go on your own and sell what you know as courses, but it's going to be the least, in my opinion, out of the other 2 options. So you're considering escaping the corporate grind? Are you interested in any of these 3 ways I've mentioned today? Have you considered these already? What are some of your reservations? What are some of the challenges maybe that are unique to your situation, that I haven't talked about today that are holding you back? And are you excited about it at all? Is this something that you have wanted to do, but maybe you just need more information and more encouragement? Well, I'd really like to help you this year. Until next time, leave me some comments. Thanks.